Aloha and welcome to Conversations to Enlighten and Heal. Today, in the first hour of our show, I'll be speaking with Dr. Raymond Moody, author of the classic bestseller Life After Life, now in its 25th anniversary. At the top of the hour, neurosurgeon Dr. John L. Turner, a friend of Dr. Moody's and the author of Medicine, Miracles, and Manifestations, will join us on the show for a deeper look into the science behind near-death and out-of-body experiences. Conversations is sponsored by HealthMasterySystems.com, holistic products for body, mind, and soul, and PurePlantEssentials.com, organic aromatherapy. Please visit these websites today. Dr. Moody is widely known as a world thought leader in the area of near-death studies and coined the phrase near-death experience. Dr. Moody has written more than 11 books on the subject of the afterlife. His famous book, Life After Life, has sold more than 13 million copies worldwide and has just been re-released in its 25th anniversary edition. Dr. Moody's groundbreaking work about death and dying continues to capture enormous public interest, and his newest book, Glimpses of Eternity, has just been released this September. Glimpses of Eternity is a culmination of Dr. Moody's latest findings. It gives profound insights into the topic of death and dying, which have never been revealed to the public before. Dr. Moody received his M.D. from the Medical College of Georgia and a Ph.D. in philosophy from the University of Virginia. Dr. Moody trains hospice workers, clergy, psychologists, and other medical professionals in all aspects of his work in death and dying. In his private practice with the terminally ill, Dr. Moody has helped thousands of people to cope with death and dying and the death of their loved ones. Dr. Moody is a renowned speaker and noted authority on death and dying, and has appeared several times on Oprah, as well as on hundreds of other national media, including NBC Today, ABC's Turning Point, Donahue, the Sally Jesse Raphael Show, Geraldo, and the Joan Rivers Show. To learn more about Dr. Moody and his fascinating work on death and dying, please visit his website, lifeafterlife.com. That's lifeafterlife.com. Please welcome to the show my very special guest, Dr. Raymond Moody. Hi, Raymond. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, KG. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Well, you have
Delighted.
Well, it's great to have you here. You have wonderful information to share that will be helpful to thousands of people, I know. So you're considered the world's leading authority in the field of near-death experiences. You've devoted your entire career to the scientific research and study on near-death experiences and have worked with countless terminally ill patients and their loved ones, which you write about in your books. So tell us something about your clinical research and investigation with people who experienced clinical death, then revived. What's the most interesting experience you have ever witnessed personally?
Well, KG, I never even heard of this until I was 18 years old in 1962, and I read about it in Plato's Republic, of all places. I was a philosophy major at the University of Virginia and went on to get my Ph.D. in philosophy there. And when I was a third-year student at UVA, I heard from one of my philosophy professors that a professor of psychiatry there, Dr. George Ritchie, who remains to this day the finest person I ever knew in my life. And Dr. Ritchie had this experience in 1943 when he was pronounced dead twice, about 9 minutes apart. So he was in the state of apparent clinical death for at least 9 minutes. They don't know how long before he was discovered by the ward boy that he had been in that state. But Dr. Ritchie's story, probably because it was the first one I heard, remains to me the most fascinating of all. He talked about being actually pronounced dead. His death certificate was written out, but from his point of view, he left his body and he saw his own physical body there in the Army hospital ward. This was when he was a volunteer in World War II, and then had this experience in which a light filled up the room and displayed around him a full-color, moving, three-dimensional panorama consisting of everything he had ever done. He was there in the presence of a powerful being of complete compassion and love that he identified as Christ, who showed him different realms of the afterlife. And I've heard many stories that really match George's detail for detail. But, you know, I think maybe the emotional impact of the very first one you hear kind of sticks with you. But in the interim, since that time, I've talked with thousands of people from all over the world who really went to the brink of death. Many of them had lengthy cardiac arrests and came back with this same story, which we know now has been confirmed by physicians all over the world. We can say that this is pretty much a universal experience among human beings.
So what are the most common experiences reported after a near-death experience? Do people, you mentioned that he had this knowing that it was Jesus Christ that he was seeing. So do people ever report seeing angels, other?
Oh yes, absolutely. And this is reported by people of all religions, and basically the standard things people tell us is that at this point where their heart stops beating, they often hear their doctor say, "Oh my God, he's dead," or words to that effect. And from their point of view, they're surprised by this because they feel that they rise out of their physical bodies. They see their own bodies down below, and they see the resuscitation attempts going on. Very often they tell us that they move through a passageway of some work that they may
kind of tunnel
to a tunnel. That's right. Into a beautiful light. They say that this is far brighter than anything we've ever experienced on the earth, and yet completely comforting and full of peace and joy. That they say this light is pervaded by love that just defies description. People say often that they hear beautiful music, that, again, music that's just indescribable from the earthly point of view. And again, this notion that it's indescribable is something that we hear constantly. People say that no matter how articulate they may be or however many languages they may speak, that the experience they have is just something utterly beyond words. And they tell us that in that light they meet up with relatives or friends of theirs who've died before, that they see them there not as a physical body as we experience here in this world, but more as a form of light, which they recognize. They say that people in this state seem to be in the prime of life. And this is often accompanied with a life review and the presence, again, of this being of complete compassion and love that they describe as a bright light who guides them through this experience.
So they're guided.
Yes, well, and guided in the sense that the typical description I get with this is people say that everything is there at once. In other words, you see every detail of your life in this full-color, three-dimensional hologram almost. And that because language is sequential, when they describe it, they have to describe it as though it were a sequence. But in the experiencing of it, it's not sequential. Rather, they say that everything is there at once. And this being of light sort of directs their attention to specific aspects of it. No words are exchanged, but they say they are immediately aware of the thoughts. And they tell us that in this panorama, you don't review your life from the point of view you had when you were in it. Rather, that in this review, when you see yourself doing an action, then when that action has its consequence, you feel yourself embedded in the consciousness of those with whom you've interacted. And so if you see yourself doing a mean-spirited action to somebody else, then you feel the sad feelings empathically and directly that you brought about in that person's life. Or when you see yourself doing kind-hearted actions, then you feel the good feelings. And so naturally, when people come back from this, they tell us that their lives have been dramatically transformed. They say that whatever they had been chasing before, that this experience assures them that the most important thing we can do while we're alive here is to cultivate loving relationships with others. And they tell us that they have absolutely no more fear of death, that to them their experience conveyed complete conviction that what we call death is just a passage into another state of existence beyond this life.
So it sounds like a trans-dimensional place, what I would call trans-dimensional, because, like you say, it's like holographic, like you're perceiving everything at once. You can't. What vehicle are you perceiving with? It can't be the mind, because the mind seems like that would be overwhelming to the mind to have all that at once.
This is exactly the word I have used, trans-dimensional, and I think that's a very important concept for understanding these things, because people tell us when they go into this experience that there just are no words. And so obviously any words that they can use to describe it ultimately fail. They say that it's beyond anyone's ability to put it into words. And
it would be limiting it.
That's
so
right.
It sounds like the absolute, an experience of the absolute beauty, absolute truth.
Yes. And most remarkably of all, KG, this is something I've known about for a long time. I first hearing one of these in 1972 from one of my own medical school professors, but this experience that people report when they almost die is identical in every detail to the experiences of people at the bedside of the dying as well, or what we call shared death experiences. That it's very common for people standing there at the bedside of someone who actually does pass away, that when that happens, the bystanders themselves talk about such things as, sometimes I hear that the bystander will say that as the person in the bed died, they themselves got out of their body and rose up and accompanied the dying person toward this light. Or another thing I used to hear most of these from physicians back in the 1970s and early 80s, because at that time the standard medical practice was when a patient was dying, the doctors and nurses would come in and sort of escort the family out under the theory that this would be too overwhelming for the patient's family. So it was typically, back when I entered medical school in 72, the practice was, the doctors would come in. And at that time I heard most of these from physicians who would tell me such things as that they saw what seemed to be a transparent replica of the dying person sort of stand up and from the body and move away, or describe it often as a sort of often roundish or globular shaped bright light of golden or grayish hues would rise up and move away. But now, with the change in the hospital practice, so that now the doctors and nurses encourage the family of the patient to be there till the